This is sponsor talk, but I'm not going to give you a sales pitch because who cares, right? For the past year, we've been writing Devio, and that's a new code hosting service for the enterprise mainly. So most of you guys are probably using GitHub to host your repos, but for the enterprise users, we are providing Devio. And yeah, that's it. We're doing repo hosting, collaboration tools, some stuff for managers. But if you remember anything from yesterday's talks, everyone is talking about decoupling, APIs, service architectures, and that's exactly the kind of stuff that we've been working on with Devio. And the cool thing is that because of that, it's released for everyone to build plugins and apps for Devio. Everyone of you can build new apps for us. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what it means for the interface development to have all these APIs. Because basically, if you're developing Rails, you have an MVC model in this one app, but if you have all the APIs in a service, you're basically ditching the model and controller in a way, and you're just ending up with the views. And that's why we ditch Rails. And I'm going to go through a couple of points for that. You're going to disagree with me on all of this, but anyway. First, this is the most important thing. Interfaces are illogical. Rails has domain objects, but people work in a different way. A good example is repos and commits. You do not want to present Git commits to a user in the way that Git stores them, I guarantee you. And that's a problem that we've had. But with Rails, you typically sort of have a view for each domain object, but if you have domain objects stored in a way that makes sense for a backend architecture, you're going to have problems when you're trying to present those for the user. And we ended up building our own view logic completely. Rails is meant for delivering really preprocessed views. And that means that basically you serve one view, one HTML document per HTTP request. And when the user wants to do something, anything with that view, you basically deliver another HTML document, even if it's just like sorting the table somewhere. And that makes no sense. From an interface development perspective, view is just starting to live when it's delivered to the user. From Rails perspective, it basically dies when it goes to the browser, unless you have JavaScript there. But we'll get to that later. We also ended up ditching a lot of sort of excess technology from our stack. We're not using ERB, SCS. Well, we are using the SCSS a little bit, but not in the sense that a lot of you might know. Like you have a bunch of gems and tools that are using these huge stacks of SCSS code, mixins and rivals and whatever. We are also not using HAML or ERB for templating. You should all move to client-side templating if you haven't already. Populate everything with JavaScript. It's a good rule of thumb. Also, we're not using CoffeeScript because you anyway have to deal with JavaScript for debugging. The plugins aren't going to be JavaScript. It's just going to make it a lot easier for all of you if you just use JavaScript. You're going to disagree with me, I told you. Also, not YAML. That's the stupidest thing there is. Just use JSON because it's the same thing. Yeah. Next thing. What the fuck is really up with page refreshes these days? You can load everything with JavaScript with AJAX. You don't need to reload another page for sorting the table or moving to another view even. If you look at your smartphone, you load a news app, for example, and you switch categories in that news application. It doesn't reload the application when you reload the category or change the category, but that's how the web works for some reason. But it doesn't have to, and it won't for longer. Basically, the user standards for interfaces on the web are going to skyrocket, and if you sort of can't keep up with that, Rails probably won't allow you to unless you do something else with it. You're going to fall behind. And like I said, JavaScript is basically the only opportunity, the only option for writing web interfaces. nothing else will run in your browser. That's like, there's nothing any of us can do with it. We can maybe write new rendering engines for browsers or something, I don't know. You can write plugins, but no one wants Flash or Silverlight or anything like that. So JavaScript is basically the only thing for at least the next 5 years. The only feasible option. That's the only thing that will get a DOM object moving on the screen. Nothing else will do it. So better to just accept it, try to live with it. If you don't like JavaScript, the other option is to not try the user interface. And because of this, Rails is in Ruby. Ruby is not JavaScript. Don't write interfaces with Rails. Write that with JavaScript. So basically what it comes down to, if you are using APIs and you're writing a client for APIs, you have domain logic in the APIs, so you have your models and controls there, in a way. You end up having just dumb views in your client. And you don't want to use Rails for those dummy views because it's not JavaScript. The only thing you might want to use Rails is maybe the asset pipeline, but it sucks, so that's why we're not using it. We basically built our own asset pipeline because, yeah, no Rails for now. I went through this pretty quickly, so I might be able to show you our client. Let's see. The screen is really small, but our client, of course, doesn't break because it's not shit. Like you see, we have a full-on JavaScript web client, and all the view transitions, page transitions, are handled with Ajax and JavaScript. No page refreshes. And if you look closely, you might realize that all the views are packed into small sub-applications. And these are all independent apps in independent app packages, which is why we have our own parsing logic, basically as a pipeline for creating these views. And it's not just these pages, it's actually stuff like this. We have nice task layouts to sort of replace pop-ups. Pop-ups suck, don't use them. There are a lot of better ways to use screen real estate. And none of this you can do with Rails. We found out that we just have to override everything Rails gives you. So we ended up using Sinatra, which is sort of gives you more freedom to do what you really want when you know what you want. Rails gives you a lot of answers, but if you're trying to do something new and you have a new idea, Rails is probably going to limit you in some way, even if you don't know yet. It's going to make it hard. So let's write something here. All right, that worked. Pretty nice. Inherent works.
What happens if the user copies that URL that changes so nicely?
Excuse me?
Yeah, what happens if you copy the URL that you made change so nicely there? How do you build up the application?
Actually, that's not that hard. Use history.js. That basically is just data hunting. Not a big problem. We have a standardized data model, which lets us sort of standardize parameters and data objects we have. So we can use that and the URL. So that's actually the easy part. The hard part is to sort of get everything loading the right time, make sure all the events are working, they are binded and unbinded in the right time, and stuff like that. You never worry about this stuff when you're using Rails, because you're using Rails to create static views. But that's not really future-proof. I'm going to argue that in a couple of years, users are going to expect stuff like this in web applications. Maybe not on news sites or stuff like that. But if you're developing web applications and interfaces for those, try to keep thinking, what are users going to expect in 3 years? Or are you going to come on this stage in 1 year and say, okay, yeah, we were so awesome, we rewrote all our client code. We are not going to do that because we're going to be on this stage probably next year and show you all kinds of new things we've been able to write here, instead of having to rewrite anything. Okay, that's basically it. Come see more at our booth, try out the game if you haven't. We still have some prizes left, so yeah, one more question.
You talked about how you use the front end. What's running the back end then?
Rails. Yeah, Rails is pretty good. I'm not saying that. But not for front end, because it's not JavaScript. So that's basically it. Thanks.